Welcome to the Disney Wedding Podcast, brought to you by Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide, the only guidebook and bridal organizer created exclusively for Walt Disney World weddings and vow renewals. I'm Carrie Hayward, and each week I share real-world planning advice and money-saving tips from couples who've celebrated at Disney parks and resorts and on the Disney Cruise Line. Join me now as the Disney Wedding Podcast shares real experiences and expert insights from Disney destinations around the world. Today on the Disney Wedding Podcast, we are talking all about how to start planning your Walt Disney World wedding or vow renewal. Whether you've been planning your Disney wedding in your head for years, or you just discovered that Disney does weddings, we have the steps and tips that are going to set you on the path to your dream Disney's fairy tale wedding or vow renewal. My guest today is Natalie Stumpfig, who had her ceremony at a nearby Catholic church and then did a Disney ceremony at the Wedding Pavilion with a reception at the Grand Floridian Ballroom in Salons 5 and 6, and she had a welcome party at the Contemporary. So today, Natalie is going to tell us all about that event and also offer her tips and advice for getting started planning. We will be covering three main components of planning a Disney wedding. We will start with pricing, then we will look at how to book your wedding, and then we'll go over the planning process. So welcome, Natalie.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
Thanks for being here today. I would love to have you start and just give us an overview of what your Disney wedding was like.
Absolutely. So my Disney wedding ended up being a sort of 2-day adventure because we wanted to get married in the Catholic Church. That technically had to be first to follow the church rules for the Diocese of Orlando where we live. So we ended up going with a church ceremony on a Friday in the afternoon. Everything was beautiful, and we just kept it super small with our bridal party since a lot of folks were still arriving into town. And then we welcomed all of our guests for a dessert party that evening at the Contemporary at the Portico Share with the view of the fireworks to close out the night, which turned out so, so great and was such a nice way to greet all of the guests. And then the next day, we did it all again, which was a great excuse for me to wear two dream ball gowns, and had a ceremony at the Wedding Pavilion at 2:30, followed by our pre-reception at the Whitehall Room and Patio, and then our reception in the Grand Floridian Ballroom Salons 5 and 6, and even got to close out the night with some fireworks photos out on Sago Cay Point at the Grand Floridian when Happily Ever After was playing. So it was just a very, very busy but dream 2 days with our loved ones.
How many guests did you have?
We ended up with 120.
Wow. Okay. And I'm also really excited to talk to you about this because I don't think a lot of people know that you can have just a Disney reception. Now, you guys decided to have a Disney ceremony and your Catholic ceremony and a reception, but a lot of times when people want to get married in a Catholic church, they think that means they can't have a Disney wedding, but they can have just a reception. So we'll talk a little bit about that during the show.
Yeah, it ended up being a great option. We did consider not having the Disney ceremony and just having the Catholic ceremony, or doing the Catholic ceremony in a convalidation after. There's so many options, but I love the option we got. The Disney ceremony, you can really completely personalize. So it was a great chance to have personalized vows. We worked with Reverend Kevin Knox, and he did a great job helping us customize and make it really special to us. Whereas the Catholic ceremony is what it is. You're repeating after the priest and saying the words that everyone says. So it was a great balance of both of those things for us. And it was a dream for me and for my family to have a wedding at the Wedding Pavilion. So we were so excited to make both of those work.
That's fantastic. Okay, great. So let's start at the beginning. The first thing everybody always wants to know about when they start researching Disney weddings is how much is it going to cost? Well, I just had to release a new update to the Fairytale Weddings Guide because Disney has raised some of their prices in 2026, but not all of them. And we'll talk a bit about how all of this pricing works. So when you get married at Walt Disney World, the first thing to know is that there are no package weddings. Everything is a la carte, and Disney requires you to spend a certain total amount that is based on your ceremony venue, the day of the week, and the time of day. This is called an Event Minimum Expenditure. Now, if you do decide to have your ceremony off-site, like at a Catholic church, your Event Minimum Expenditure would be based on your reception venue. So once you know the venue you want for your ceremony and the day of the week and the time of day you want, you can look that up in the charts inside Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide in Chapter 1, and that will show you the event minimum expenditure, this minimum amount that you have to spend with Disney to have your wedding there. The next component is a ceremony venue fee, and that counts toward the event minimum, and it covers everything you need for your ceremony. So you can see the ceremony venue fees and the event minimums in Chapter 1. And again, if you aren't having your ceremony with Disney, then you would not have to pay the ceremony venue fee, which is great. You'll save a little bit of money there. Now, people always ask, well, how do I know exactly how much my wedding is going to cost? Because one thing you'll see is sometimes people will go into the Facebook groups for Disney couples and say, I want to get married at the wedding pavilion. How much does that cost? How much did you spend? But it's going to be different for everyone because it depends on the day of the week, the time of day, and if they had a catered event, it depends on how many guests they had. So if you go into the Fairytale Weddings Guide in Chapter 1, you will see there is a formula for calculating the rough cost, which is you take the event minimum for the day of the week, time of day, and venue you want. You subtract the ceremony venue fee, and what's left is the amount that you have to spend on everything else Disney offers. So food, beverages, cake, photography, floral, decor, transportation, characters, anything you pay Disney for is going to count toward that event minimum. So looking at an example, say you want the wedding pavilion on a Friday at 5 p.m. That has a $25,000 event minimum expenditure. That has an $8,000 ceremony venue fee. So you take the $8,000 ceremony venue fee out, and that leaves $17,000 that you need to spend on anything else that you can get from Disney except tax and service charge. When you have a Disney wedding, certain elements are going to get a service charge and certain elements are going to get tax. And all of these are calculated automatically in the budget calculator in Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide because it's very complicated to try to figure out what gets tax, what gets service charge, what service charges get tax on top of them. All of that is calculated for you automatically, and it is broken out in a separate field so that you can see, I'm spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 extra on top of the minimum just to pay for tax and service charge. Now, if you decide to add a reception, then you are going to have a per person food and beverage minimum, so an amount that you have to spend for every guest on food, beverages, and cake. And your two options for a reception are a full reception, which is what they call an event that lasts 3 hours or more, or what they call a celebration, which is an event that lasts 2 hours or less. So if you do a full reception, the per person minimums are $145 for a breakfast or a brunch, and that usually lasts 3 or 4 hours. It's $190 per person at lunch, which usually lasts 5 hours, and 1 hour of that they consider your pre-reception or your cocktail hour. And then if you do dinner, you have to spend $255 per person for a 5-hour event. But if you decide to do a celebration for just 1 to 2 hours, then your per person minimum is only $125. So a celebration is a walk-around event. It only lasts 2 hours. You would not have time to have a DJ and dancing. Many locations, you're not there long enough to have characters. But what a lot of people like to do is have these events in the parks or at the resorts where you can see fireworks. So that's kind of your entertainment. You can't have amplified entertainment while the park is open if you're inside the parks and you are outside. So that can be kind of tricky because if you have a ceremony and then you want to go do your celebration, you're thinking, okay, how am I going to do my first dances to my favorite song if I can't have amplified entertainment when I'm in Epcot outside? So a lot of times what people will do is they will have their first dance at the ceremony venue, and the musician who is included for free in your ceremony venue fee will play the song for you, and then you could go straight to your celebration and you don't have to worry about that. The other thing, as I mentioned, you can't have characters outside in the parks while the park is open. So again, if you were in Epcot outside or if you were doing Fantasmic in Hollywood Studios, you wouldn't be able to have a character show up and greet your guests during a celebration. You would have to either have a full reception so that it lasted long enough that the park closed, the park cleared, and now your characters can come out, or you could use a resort venue where characters are allowed. So for an example, if you want to see fireworks, Grand Floridian Marina is great for that because you can see fireworks and you can have a character. So, Natalie, did you guys always know that you wanted to have a full reception, or did you ever consider doing just a celebration with your ceremony?
We knew we wanted to have a full reception, but what we did play around with is the when and the where. So when we were first looking, the thing we were most set on is the time of year that we wanted to have the wedding and having a wedding pavilion ceremony. Those were the things that if we were doing Disney, that's what we knew we wanted. We live in Florida, my husband and I do, and so we're very aware of avoiding hurricane season and the times of year that it's just really, really warm down here, and we wanted to avoid that since that's our day-to-day life. So we loved the idea of a November wedding. I initially really liked the concept of a reception in a park. I loved the American Adventure Rotunda and Epcot. And what steered us away from that was our conversation with our sales consultant. So when we talked with our sales consultant, she let me know pretty quickly that to realistically have a Saturday in November, which is what we were looking for, we were not going to get in the park at the time and date that we wanted. We had a lot of out of town guests. Both of our families are from out of state, and additionally, a lot of teachers and people in education that it's so much easier if it's on a weekend, and having our people there was a priority to us. So we were settled on a Saturday and willing to deal with that cost, or I should say my parents were very generously willing to deal with that cost since they helped to pay for the wedding. And so that kind of steered us into the ballroom lane, which actually worked out beautifully to have everything on site at the Grand Floridian kind of in that one spot. But the time and date, a day of the week charts in the Fairy Tale Weddings Guide were so helpful in that initial process to give us a realistic idea of how different it can be to have a brunch wedding on a Tuesday versus a dinner wedding on a Saturday night.
That's great. I'm so glad you found them helpful because, yeah, it is a big difference. And Disney did just raise the per person food and beverage minimums for a full reception, but not for a celebration. So if you're okay with having a more casual event that only lasts 2 hours, it's a great way to have a Disney wedding for less. Now, to meet the food and beverage minimum, that's anything you spend at the cocktail hour, which again, Disney calls it a pre-reception, at the reception, on your cake, and on your bar. So sometimes people don't realize that, yeah, cake or whatever dessert you decide to serve, that's going to count toward the per person food and beverage minimum, and then all of your beverages. So when you're looking at whether you're going to do a full reception or maybe a brunch, or you want to just do a celebration, there are a bunch of different ways you can have a Disney wedding. So you could just decide to do a ceremony through Disney's Fairytale Weddings. You don't have to have a catered event of any kind. And then sometimes guests of the Disney Wedding Podcast will make a large party reservation at a restaurant, or some of them will go to a venue and have a private reception elsewhere that's less expensive than Disney. And so then the next option might be to have a ceremony and a celebration. So again, you could do a ceremony and then in the evening have a dessert party, or maybe you could do what they call a cake and champagne celebration, which is just a little 2-hour event where you cut the cake and you have toasts, champagne toasts. Doesn't have to be champagne. It could be cider if you want. You could add some appetizers so that it's a little more substantial, but it's not a traditional sit down full reception. Your next option would be ceremony combined with a full reception of 3 hours or longer. And then you could still do a dessert party later. What we did was we had our ceremony in the morning, then we had a brunch, then we had a nice long break that everybody used to go to the park or swim or nap. And then we all got back together in the evening and had a dessert party, which was great because it gave everybody something to look forward to at the end of the night. However, if you add a dessert party after a full reception, the dessert party is not going to count toward that event minimum that you're working toward. It would be an extra event. If you had just the dessert party with the ceremony, it would count. And then also an option we've talked about a little bit here is you could just have your reception through Disney's Fairytale Weddings. Maybe you want to get married in a church. Maybe you have a place offsite that's a lot cheaper for a ceremony, and it's worth it to meet the minimums just through a reception with Disney, but have your ceremony elsewhere. So if you do go this route and you don't have a ceremony through Disney, the event minimums will be a little bit different than they are if you have a ceremony. And all of this is listed in chapter 1 of Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide. So you can look up what that would be. So right now, if you don't have a ceremony, you would be spending between $15,000 and $20,000 at the resorts. And the event minimum at the parks is $20,000 to $25,000 if you don't have a ceremony. And then again, mentioned this before, but they have a 26% service charge, which they now break down so that you can see that 15% of it is a gratuity that goes to food and beverage servers, and 11% is the service charge. But combined, it's 26%. And then there's also 6.5% tax, and neither of those count toward the event minimum. So you're going to want to look at the budget calculator starting on page 242 of the Fairytale Weddings Guide to see how much extra that's going to add to your total.
The one thing that I learned in our planning process was that a dessert party can really be customized in terms of like the type of food that you serve too. When I originally heard dessert party, I was like, so you can't feed them anything else? Like you can't feed them savory food or something that feels more substantial. But for our welcome party, we wanted to kind of give the guests almost dinner without paying dinner prices. And we ended up with a pasta action station with two options with proteins in the pastas and a salad bar, plus all the fun dessert options for way less than the cost of what it would be to like have a sit down dinner. And everyone left feeling like we served them dinner. So that was a great hack that we kind of discovered, is that we basically got a dinner event, but by having it be a dessert party and having it be action stations, we were able to serve the guests a dinner like event while managing the cost, because that was our welcome party and not our main event.
I'm so glad you brought this up, and that's a really good point because, yeah, in the Disney Weddings community, we use dessert party as a shorthand for this type of event, but yeah, you are not limited to desserts. You're not even limited to the menus that your planner is going to send you. And so one of my top tips is to do exactly what Natalie did, and that is to have an action station, just one kind of like DIY customizable item. One of the most popular ones is to do a nacho bar, but you could do a taco bar, you could do customizable DIY mac and cheese, and then add one customizable type of dessert. So like a sundae bar, or you can get a cart full of what they call ice cream novelties, which is basically all the ice cream bars you can get in the parks. And those you just pay per ice cream novelty. And it's a really inexpensive way to give guests a lot of choice and make them feel like they're getting a lot of food for not a lot of money. So yeah, that's a great point.
And people love those ice cream novelties. You will be surprised how many like grown adults will get so excited about a Mickey ice cream bar. And like Carrie mentioned, it's just so much more affordable because it's bill on consumption. So people who don't want it, you're not wasting money paying for them for something they don't want. But the joy on guests' faces and watching like grown adults eat Mickey bars is awesome.
Okay, so you've heard all the big numbers now. Now we're going to talk about how to control your costs. So sometimes people think that Disney has hidden costs, or that, you'll go in and they'll say that your minimum is $15,000, but really they're going to charge you $30,000. You control the cost of your wedding by making choices. And the number one choice you can make to limit the cost of your wedding is to limit your guest list. So the more people you have, the more mouths you're going to have to feed, and the more you're going to pay Disney. As an addendum, I also recommend limiting the number of attendants, because if you have 15 bridesmaids, that's 15 bouquets that you're going to have to provide for them. And that's maybe 15 hair and makeup services if you're feeling really generous. It's also going to really extend the amount of time it takes to get ready for your wedding in the morning. Sometimes you have to get up in the middle of the night because it takes so long to get everybody ready. So the guest count is a really easy place to start saving. Now, Natalie, it sounds like because you're local, you were not able to limit your guest list.
Yeah, we invited over 200 people. I come from a very, very large family. And honestly, the only people who live in Florida are myself and my husband and a few of our local friends. So we had 120, and probably 115 of them came from out of state. So you'll be surprised how many people choose to come and make the trip because they're so curious about a Disney wedding. So my number one tip is, if you don't want 100 people, like be really mindful about the people that you invite because you will be surprised at some of the people who come in a really fun way. It's so exciting when people want to come and celebrate you, but don't bank on a lot of people saying no just because you're out of state, because in our experience, people in a lot of cases were really excited to make the trip.
That's a great point. And another thing you can do if you just cannot afford to pay for that many people is to limit the guest list and then have an at-home reception later on. And this doesn't have to be another full-blown expensive catered wedding in a private venue. We did a casual open house where we just hung out at my in-laws' house and we said we're going to be there between this hour and that hour. It was a potluck. People brought their own food. We passed around photo albums that had our wedding photos. We played our wedding video. It was a great way for people who couldn't come all the way out from California to Florida for our wedding to get to experience it and hear about it and see the photos, but not have to make that trip. So another way to cut costs on your Disney wedding is to have it Monday through Thursday. And the cheapest time of day is brunch. So sometimes people balk at this when they hear this because most people, when they think of a wedding, they think Saturday night in a ballroom, dancing, lots of booze. That's what a wedding is. And how am I going to have a big party if it's at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday? But the thing about Disney is everybody who's there is on vacation. And when you're on vacation, the schedule is out the window. So if you tell your guests to come to Disney and show up at 6 a.m. for your Epcot ceremony, they're going to be like, okay, this must just be how it works. And inevitably, afterward, people who worried about what their guests were going to say that their guests had a great time. The DJ got everybody dancing at 9 a.m. They couldn't believe it. And they were able to save a lot of money by having their wedding at that time. Natalie, did you guys always know you wanted a Saturday night event, or did you consider doing like a brunch wedding or a weekday wedding?
We were always pretty set on the traditional kind of dinner time wedding vibe. Like I said, I come from a big and pretty traditional Irish Catholic family from the Northeast, and weddings are very much a certain way. And so my parents felt pretty strongly about wedding includes dinner and it's at night and all of that. And so we always knew we were going to go in that direction. I will say though, one of my bridesmaids also had a Disney wedding a few years before, and they had a brunch wedding, and we had a fantastic party. We had a great time. We were dancing. So I personally would not have been afraid of a little brunch wedding because you can make it any way that you want to make it. Like the Disney DJs will get the people going. You can set the mood in the ballroom or wherever you're having it. And so it is a great option for a more cost effective way. But we kind of always knew we were going to do the most traditional Disney wedding available. So that looked like a Saturday night.
And that's a good point too, because sometimes people think, oh, a Disney wedding, it's going to be like Mickey. Is he going to officiate? It's going to look like a kid's birthday party. But as Natalie is saying, you can have a very traditional Saturday night wedding in a ballroom that looks just like a regular wedding. And just because you're at Disney doesn't mean it's going to be like childish or like a kid's party.
Yeah, that was something that I think my in-laws are not Disney people, and they essentially asked if it was gonna be like a kid's birthday party when I told them that that's where I really wanted to have the wedding, and I think they, in particular, were blown away by just the level of service and the elevated vibe, especially in the ballrooms at some of the deluxe resorts like the Grand Floridian. It just feels so fancy, so premium, and so you can really create that feel with some magical Disney touches and things you can only do with Disney that make it fun and magical and special, but you can get that really kind of elevated, luxury, elegant vibe that you might imagine in a big city in a ballroom there. You can have that at Disney too.
Definitely. Now, if you're trying to control costs, another thing you can do, as we mentioned, is just have your ceremony and then either make a reservation at a restaurant afterwards or just have a celebration like a dessert party or a cake and champagne event where you just cut the cake and you have toasts. And this goes back to the whole, when you're at Disney, all bets are off. Again, this is not like your traditional wedding, but people are going to be expecting it to be a little unusual because they're going on vacation. And even though you've been scouring all the Facebook groups and TikTok and you know everything there is to know about Disney weddings, they don't know what the options are. So the option you show them is going to be what they think a Disney wedding is. So if you want to do a ceremony and just go to 1900 Park Fair for a meal afterwards, they're going to think that's amazing. And they're going to tell all their friends about how they got to see characters at their friend's Disney wedding. Now, the cheapest Disney wedding that you can have is the $15,000 event minimum, and that has a $7,000 ceremony fee. These are going to be events held at the resorts. The ceremony is outdoors. If you are trying to stick to a very strict budget because the most important thing is that you have a Disney wedding, then you're going to be spending the $7,000 of the 15 on your ceremony venue fee, and then you'll have $8,000 left to spend on the flowers, any transportation, on music, entertainment, food, all of that. Now, if you really just want to have Magic Kingdom portraits and you're not as fussed about where your ceremony is, the absolute cheapest way to do that, because only couples who have had weddings or vow renewals at Disney resorts, so that would be any place in Florida, the California resorts, Aulani in Hawaii. If you want to qualify for having those portraits, the cheapest way to do a Disney wedding is to have your wedding on the Disney Cruise Line, because those start at $4,000 on top of your cruise fare. So a lot of times people will do like the 3-day cruise, whatever the cheapest 3-day cruise is, and then they spend $4,000 on a package. Now they've had an official Disney's Fairytale Wedding, and they can qualify to do portraits inside Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Animal Kingdom, or Hollywood Studios, or even inside the water parks. Did you guys add a portrait session to your wedding?
We didn't. It's something that we considered, but sticking to a budget for a Disney wedding is a challenge. And we were coming up to decision time and we were getting close to our budget, really pushing the limits on our budget. So it's one of the things that I decided that I could do without, because there were so many photos at the Grand Floridian that were so iconic to me. That was like, those were the photos that I was really dreaming about, is the photos with Cinderella's carriage and the wedding pavilion with the castle in the background and picture point. And so all of those were the kind of key photos I had in my brain. And so the park shoot was something that we decided that we could go without for the sake of budget.
That's a good point. And the other thing about the park shoot is you can come back at any time and do them. So you could come back for your first anniversary, your 10th anniversary. Once you've had a Disney's Fairytale Wedding, you qualify to purchase the portrait session. So I think a lot of people, there's this misnomer that you have to do it within a year. And I think what that is that when you pay for the portrait session with your wedding, you have to have the portrait session within a year because of the way Disney does their accounting. They have to put that money in the budget toward your actual portrait session. But if you are willing to come back and pay in advance, you can do them at any time. So that's a great way to save money on your wedding at the time. It's just, you don't need to do the portraits now. Come back later to celebrate an anniversary, and that will allow you time to save up for them too. Now, when you're trying to control your costs, the best way to do this is to make a sample budget in a spreadsheet program like Excel, or to use the one in the back of Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide. And then once you put in your guest count and the ceremony venue fee for whatever venue you pick, you can then go through my guide and find out the prices of everything else you want and add those to your spreadsheet. And that will help you play around with the different elements to see how you're going to stick to your budget or how far over your budget you're going to go. And you can swap things in and out and see how that changes the numbers. Natalie, how did you guys decide to budget for your event?
So I definitely used the budget calculator worksheet in the Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide. That was super helpful, especially because it helps you see the taxes and service fees that are really hard to calculate on your own, and get that mental picture. It is one of those things that you, to some extent, in our case, we just had to adjust expectations as we went through the process. There's so much variability in how you can approach budget. You can give your planner super strict, like, this is the number and we're not going over it to start. Or the way we sort of approached is, here's what we're looking to achieve, and kind of let them come back with the first rounds of costs of what things might look like, and then made choices from there about the things that were most important to least important. We were fortunate to have a little bit of wiggle room. We had sort of a target idea, but we really wanted to make sure that we were getting the things that were most important to us. So we just sort of did a little shoot for the moon of like, here's what we're dreaming about, here's what we'd really like it to be. And then once that came back, tried to reel that into expectations and make cuts based on what we felt like we could do without, or we could downgrade to find a more affordable option, working with our outside coordinator and our Disney planner.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I think once you see the budget and you see how much it is, it helps kind of snap into sharp relief what your priorities are. And so then, like you mentioned, for you, it was the carriage and getting photos around the Grand Floridian. So once you know that that's a priority, you can be like, invitations, not that important to me. I don't need to spend $2,000 on invitations. It helps you see where you are okay with spending less in order to put the money towards something that's more important.
Ours were a lot of like decor elements of I really had in my brain that I needed gold flatware. And when the price for that came back, I was like, wow, I really actually don't need that at all. It really it gets your priorities in check pretty quickly and helps you realize the things that you're like, if I have silver flatware, my wedding is still going to be beautiful and I'm going to feel really good about it. Whereas cutting the carriage was just gonna, like throw my whole vision off and all of that. So it helps you really get some clarity.
That's a great point. Okay, so you've decided you can do it, you can afford it, you want to do it. How do you book? The booking window depends on what type of event you're doing. So if you are going to be doing a ceremony and a full reception, or you're going to have an offsite ceremony, but you still want to do a full reception through Disney, so that's 3 hours or more, you can contact Disney at 16 months out and they will book your wedding at 12 months out. But if you're just doing a ceremony, or if you're doing a ceremony with a celebration, you can contact Disney at 12 months out and you can book at 10 months out. So when you're ready to book, you can call their phone number, which is 321-939-4610. You can DM them on Facebook, or you can use the form on the Disney's Fairytale Weddings website. And someone will call you back and set up a time for you to talk with a wedding sales consultant, who is the person who's going to draw up your contract. So if you have been talking to them and getting options and asking questions when you're 16 months out or 12 months out, when you approach the deadline for booking, whether that's 12 months or 10 months, I would just shoot them an email maybe a few days before, the week before, to make sure that they know, you're still interested and you want them to try to get your dates and times on the day that you're allowed to book. So they will ask you for different combinations, especially if you want someplace that's in high demand, like the wedding pavilion. So you can say, all right, well, our number one choice is this Saturday at this time at the wedding pavilion with a reception here. But if we can't get that time, we still want that day and we're willing to take a different time. Or it has to be that time, so we'll take a different day. Natalie, when you guys were planning, what kinds of combinations did you give them?
So once we had kind of determined that we wouldn't be able to have our reception in the park because of the festival season and Epcot and the time of day that we wanted to have the wedding and on a Saturday and all of that, we really landed on the wedding pavilion and the Grand Floridian ballroom. And so we knew that was like the location we wanted to be at. We wanted it to be on a Saturday. We were a little bit flexible on time of having it at the 2:30 ceremony time or the 5:30, and we were flexible on which weekend essentially it would be in the month. We were super lucky and we got everything that we wanted ranked first. We were very, very nervous because I know that Saturdays at the wedding pavilion at 2:30 can be pretty competitive, but we were so lucky. I called, I think, the week after I got engaged in October, and we had kind of narrowed to November right away. So we started working with our sales consultant. She was super helpful in guiding us. And then once we had narrowed down to our priority weekend, we had that all locked in and we were communicating all the way up to that week of being exactly 12 months out. And we found out 12 months out to the day that we got our number one choice for ceremony and reception and time and everything, which we felt so, so lucky.
That's so great to hear. Yeah, it might take up to a week or sometimes even 2 weeks to hear back, but it just depends on what their workload is at the time. And that's great, Natalie, that you were able to hear back right away, because I know some people can be nervous. And if you are worried, it really is only the wedding pavilion that's in high demand, and that's only in certain seasons and days of the week. So like if you're trying for a Saturday during the holiday season, yes, there might be a lot of competition. But if you want the wedding pavilion on a random Wednesday morning in September, probably not going to be that hard to get. So don't stress out. And if you want a place in the park, yes, Disney will have to get special permission for you to use the park venue, but there's not going to be a lot of competition with other couples for that. And then once they have confirmed that what you want is available, they're going to draw up what they call a letter of agreement, which is your contract. That usually takes them about 2 weeks. And while they're doing it, you don't have to worry. Your date and venues are locked in. Nobody else is going to swoop in and take them. And then you have 2 weeks once you get it back to sign and return it. So again, nobody's going to swoop in and take it while you're looking it over for 2 weeks. When you return the signed letter of agreement, you also have to pay a deposit. So the deposit is $4,000 for every location except Magic Kingdom. In Magic Kingdom, the deposit is $10,000 if you want the train station. It's $15,000 if you want East Plaza Garden, which is in front of the castle and only available in the mornings. And it's $25,000 for the deposit if you're doing an after-hours event in Magic Kingdom. All right, so now let's talk about how the actual planning process works after you sign your letter of agreement. The first thing to know is that when you're done with the letter of agreement and your wedding sales consultant, you will be handed off. So you're not going to be with the first person that you work with. You're not going to be with them the whole time. Sometimes you might still ask them questions throughout the process. Sometimes they even come to your event. Ours came to our event. I was very excited. But in general, once you're done with the sales process, you are then going to get an event planner, but you don't get one till 8 months out. So if you just signed your contract, you're 12 months out. In the meantime, while you're waiting to get assigned an event planner, there is a general email address that you can contact if you have any questions, and that is www.dftw.planner@disney.com. This is also in Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide. And it helps if when you email your questions, you put the letter of agreement reference number in the subject line so they can know, okay, who am I talking to? What's their event? And that'll help them more quickly answer your questions. And then at about 8 months out, you will be assigned your event planner. And that's the person who's going to take down all the things that you want to know, do your planning session, put your BEO together. They now do only virtual planning sessions. Back in the day, we got to go and do it in person. It was amazing, but much more convenient. You can have more than one if you need it. And when you do the virtual planning session with your planner, they are basically just going to sit down with you and cover the entire timeline of your wedding day from start to finish. So you don't have to know everything, exactly when you want everything to happen or what elements you want during that first planning session. It helps if you know a lot, but if you don't, that's okay. It'll help them make the skeleton of your BEO, which is your banquet event order, and that is going to be the Bible of your day. It's going to include everything that you want to have happen at your wedding. So that starts at your virtual planning session. You're only going to talk about the logistics that your Disney event planner covers. You'll have a separate call with the floral team. If you decide you want to use Disney's floral vendor, they're called Florida Fresh Floral. They're branded as Disney Floral, but it's an outside vendor. If you decide you want to work with them, you'll have a separate call with that person, and they will also give you a separate BEO, which is just your floral and decor and how much that's going to cost. You can also, depending on your venues, you can also use an outside vendor for floral and decor. And a lot of people do that because you can save like 50% or more, or you'll get much more bang for your buck. The problem is you can only use them when you are having an event in a ballroom. So a lot of times you have to use Florida Fresh Floral. So if you check out Chapter 5 of Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide, there is a whole list on page 125 of exactly what you can get from outside vendors or DIY and where, because it depends on your venues. So you can just use the chart to look up, okay, escort cards, got it. Oh, bouquets, I can do those anywhere. All of that is on page 125, and page 124 explains how to use outside vendors for floral and decor if you decide that you want to do that. Natalie, did you guys consider using an outside vendor for floral and decor, or did you just always know you wanted to work with Disney?
We were pretty set on working with Disney from the outset just for the simplicity of it. I am not a real crafty gal. My mom and my sister live in Philadelphia, so many, many thousands of miles away, or however many miles. And so we knew there wasn't going to be a ton of opportunity for DIY. We did end up hiring an outside coordinator with the Fairy Godmother Coordinator Service, and she was so helpful in identifying things that she had in her stores that she could bring. But we knew that for our main floral, we were wanting to use the Disney Floral, especially because they have the experience in the wedding pavilion and then they will handle the transfers. We did end up using Florida Fresh Floral even for our church ceremony, and they were able to work with us kind of in the same context of our Disney event, which was lovely, and just give us a separate line item, a separate sheet for our church floral, which was pretty minimal, but nice to have just like all one point of contact. And then they were willing to even go get the floral from the church and bring it to our welcome party, which helped us to repurpose a little bit of the floral, which was great. But we did end up using some of our outside coordinators' DIY materials for things like table numbers. She had really cute attraction posters that we used for the table numbers, and she helped us set up bookcases for our seating chart that she brought in. So we were able to save with some of those elements because we had that outside coordinator helping us and using things that she has kind of stored up over the years of helping to coordinate Disney weddings.
That's so interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of times people will hear that you can use an outside coordinator and they'll say, well, why do I need one? I'm getting a Disney planner. But the person you're working with on your BEO may not actually come to your wedding and it's not going to be managed by them. There is a separate experience team of people you've never met before who are great at their jobs, but the first time you meet them usually is either the rehearsal day or the day of your event. And their job is to coordinate the Disney end of things. So make sure the venue, the chairs are set up. Make sure that what your BEO says is where you want your sweetheart table is where it ended up. But for everything else, it can really help to have an outside coordinator who is someone who looks at your wedding holistically the entire day. They're with you the whole day. They have hem tape. If you step on the edge of your gown and it rips, they can fix it. If the best man goes missing, they can go track him down. It's nice to have somebody who doesn't work for Disney who can be there to manage all the aspects that Disney's not going to touch because they're not providing them.
I can't recommend enough having an outside coordinator. In our case, Caitlin, who we worked with, also helped with our planning process, which was so, so helpful. So, in that 4 month gap, right, you sign your LOA and you're so excited at 12 months, and then you don't even have a planner yet, but there's things you can be thinking about, like the vibe of the wedding, and we're talking through with someone who has Disney wedding experience, what the kind of vibe might be like. How do we think about planning for the color scheme and planning for this and planning for that? And having the outside coordinator was so helpful to have someone help even formulate ideas, because the Disney wedding planner, they're so good at their jobs. They really know their stuff in terms of what Disney can do and what they have to offer, but mine wasn't necessarily like a sounding board for helping me come up with ideas. She was just there to execute whatever I told her we wanted. And so having that kind of outside coordinator and planner as a thought partner from the get-go was super helpful. And then the weekend of, Caitlin, our outside coordinator, saved the day on so many fronts, like with things like hem tape and helping with our flower girl dress that had a missing bow and running out and finding a bow and sewing it to her dress. She discovered that our Unity candle got left off the BEO the night before the wedding, and she was at Michael's Crafts at 7 a.m. picking up a Unity candle. So having someone that is really there for you and looking out for you is so, so helpful in making sure that your weekend runs smooth and you can really enjoy your wedding time as opposed to being so stressed about the little details.
Right, because you shouldn't have to worry about all that. On the wedding day, all you should do is just be there, be present, and enjoy it. And it's nice to have somebody else running interference for you.
Yes.
So, about 4 weeks after your planning session, your wedding event coordinator will have your BEO ready. This is, again, it's called a banquet event order. It's funny because it's really something that they use in the industry that oftentimes is not designed to be seen by the client. And so you need to look at it and they send it to you, but sometimes it's a little bit hard to understand. So I actually do consultation sessions if you want help interpreting your BEO or going through your BEO and looking at ways to cut costs or looking for any mistakes, where I will just go through it page by page and explain what you're looking at and help you ferret out those mistakes and those costs, because it can be a little bit overwhelming if you're not a professional event planner, you've never planned an event before, it's a little bit overwhelming. But You want to make sure it's right because this is the Bible of your day. And if it's not in the BEO, Disney is not going to do it. So you have to go over it with a fine-tooth comb, make sure it has everything. The first one you get, it could be full of like pie in the sky ideas. Like Natalie was saying, maybe you asked for pricing on a bunch of stuff, but you're probably going to cut it, but you just need to see what your options are. So that first BEO, maybe the second or third one, there's a lot of revision going on. And it helps if you redline it and send it back and show them exactly what you want to change so that you can revise it down to what you really want for your wedding. Your individual item pricing, so the cost of transportation, the cost of your food menu, how much a Unity candle costs, that is not going to be locked in till 6 months when you get the BEO. The good thing is, after you get the BEO with those prices, if Disney raises the prices, you will get the prices that are listed in your BEO. So like right now, Disney just raised their prices for a bunch of stuff. If your BEO was received in December and you had the old character prices, that's what you're going to pay. They're not going to raise that on you. For couples who are having a full reception, so that's 3 hours or more, you will be invited to a menu tasting about 3 or 4 months before your date. And this is a group event where you go and they have a preset menu that they decide, but it's kind of like their best of the best, things that are really popular right now. And you get to try different dishes and desserts. And the best part is you can sit down and talk to an actual chef. There will be planners there who have your BEO on hand. And so you can in person go over these things, which is especially helpful if you are not sure about your menu, you're super picky about your menu, you need ideas, you want to know more about pricing because Disney is not very transparent about menu pricing. The menu tasting is a great opportunity to talk to a chef in person and get those questions answered. Natalie, did you guys get a chance to go to a menu tasting?
We did. We got invited weirdly early. Ours was in April for a November wedding. So I will say we attended our menu tasting at a very early stage in the process. I think we had maybe just heard our planner's name for the first time. So it was a bit of a weird experience where we didn't come with like a full, like, here's what our menu is going to be, like detailed questions for the chef. So we really went and just kind of experienced, walked around. One thing I really liked is that they had some like sample setups of tables, chairs, napkins. So you could go and kind of physically sit in the different kind of upgraded chairs, touch the different types of napkins and see a little bit of that in person. From a menu planning perspective, we did get some ideas. Like you said, they show some of their kind of most popular things. So we would have never thought to choose the beef short ribs, but they were so good at our menu planning event that that ended up being one of our dishes for our plated menu. And it was the most popular by far. People loved the short ribs so, so much. But after the tasting event, we did end up having a separate call with a chef. So that's not something that I knew was going to be an option. But as we got further down with our planner and we're talking more about the events and the specifics and the menu specifics, we weren't seeing a lot of options that we loved. And so she actually got us in touch with a chef who met with us via Teams for 30 minutes by us, my mother and I, who were kind of leading the planning of it all. And he kind of listened to the vision of what we wanted for the food and came up with something completely custom, even after we attended the tasting event. So that's not like a one-stop shop. You don't have to have your entire menu set after that experience and after talking to a chef. If you need it, the chef, at least in our case, was willing to have a Teams call to really kind of get our vision and help guide us with some of the options that they do have, because these are really talented chefs. They can do a lot of things that Disney is not going to show you on paper. And so that was something that I was really pleased to find out and ended up making our menu what we wanted it to be and didn't know it could be.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I didn't mean to scare you guys into thinking that if you can't go to the menu tasting, you're in trouble and your menu's going to be terrible because you didn't get to try things. Yeah, you definitely want to be able to work with a chef, and they don't really advertise the fact that you can ask to set up a call with them. But that is one of the best ways to customize your menu to get something unique and also to customize to a price point. So I've interviewed so many people on the Disney Wedding podcast who they gave their chef maybe looser parameters, like maybe they had a theme or maybe they knew they wanted this one dish that they really love. But when you talk to the chef about your overall vision and you let them come up with a menu, it's always way more interesting than the menus that they send you, the sample ones. And you can get them to customize it to a price point. So if you're trying to stick to a budget, you take your per person cost. So say you have to spend $255 on dinner, you can subtract the per person cost of your beverage package. And then if you're going to have a cake, you divide the price of the cake by your guest count, subtract that. And then that number, you can give that to the chef and say, hey, we're trying to meet this number. Can you help us customize something that, is maybe themed to around the world at Epcot, or my grandma's amazing lasagna? This is the recipe. Is there any way you could make this for me and then incorporate some other items that would go with it? And they will come up with something that you could never possibly have thought up on your own. And they get to have fun because it's more creative for them. So yeah, but I just really want to stress that menus are customizable. You don't have to stick with the menus that your planner gives you. And also that it's possible to request a meeting with the chef if you're just really at sea or you want to customize things and the sample menus are not working out for you. I also have years worth of old menus from past wedding menus that Disney has published and other events for, 10, 15 years on my Fairytale Weddings Guide website. There's a whole menus page. And so sometimes it can be good just to go through there and get ideas from old menus. Okay. So when you get to 90 days out, this is when your event minimum expenditure is due. So in your letter of agreement, they have told you this is how much money you have to spend with Disney to have your event. And all of it is due at 90 days out. You can make payments early. Your planner can send you a link where you can make payments, like if you want to pay over time. But by 90 days out, you owe the event minimum expenditure. Sometimes people get stressed out because maybe their BEO is still in flux. They don't have a final BEO. Doesn't matter. You don't need the BEO to be finished in order to pay this because this is the amount in your letter of agreement. It's fixed. It doesn't matter what's in your BEO. You're definitely going to be paying this. The one good thing about the 90-day payment is that $3,000 from your deposit is applied toward that. And then they hang on to $1,000 so that if on the day of you decide on a whim to say, call them up and order milk to go with your cookies like we did for our dessert party, then they can take that out of the $1,000 that they've been holding for you. So once you've made that payment, then at 30 days out, that's when your BEO has to be finalized, and that's when you pay the remaining amount. So 30 days out, your BEO is finalized. Sometimes it's less than that, especially during busy seasons. You'll see people come into the Facebook groups and be like, I'm 3 weeks out from my wedding and I don't have a finalized BEO. It's not ideal. Unfortunately, it's the way Disney works sometimes. Natalie, how did that go for you guys? Because you were in November, which is starting to get into the super busy time.
Oh, yeah. So I don't want to scare people. We signed our final BEO on Thursday for our Saturday wedding of the same week. So we had a lot of challenges throughout the planning process, just getting really confirmed answers from our planner. It's one of my biggest kind of tips that I tell people. You just have to be persistent. You have to ask very specific questions, get the specific answers that you need, and don't be afraid to go back multiple times and be like, I don't understand this component of it. And so there were pieces that were just not coming together because we weren't getting clarity until the week of. Things were not final until literally 2 to 3 days before. And so don't panic if you're in that position. So many last minute things finally we got clarity on, we got answers on, we got confirmation on when we started picking up the phone the month before and getting on the phone with our planner repeatedly. And so we had a lot of challenges. She really wanted to operate primarily over email, and that was not getting us where we needed to go. And so we spent a lot more time on Teams calls, just really being like, we need to get this hammered out in the kind of probably 4 weeks leading up to the wedding. And so if you don't have your BEO signed, it's okay. With our case in particular, we didn't have to make our final payment until the BEO was signed because we were having issues with some of the final details that were going to have some issues with the cost. And so don't panic. Like, one thing that I know for certain is that Disney will get it done. Like, they will throw your event and they want it to be great because Disney has super duper high brand standards for how things are delivered. So your wedding is going to happen, and it can be really stressful to have, like that final detail about the type of non-alcoholic beverage that was supposed to be offered, and we still don't know if they're able to source it, and they didn't give us a clear answer until 2 days before. Like, all of that can feel super stressful, but Disney will figure it out. But the planning process can be a little bit clunky. And so my number one piece of advice is get your planner on the phone and then get what they said in writing as soon as you can, so that you can help smooth that along. But it will all get done. It will be beautiful. They will make sure of it, but it might take a little bit longer than it says on paper to get there, in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. I hear this from a lot of couples on the Disney Wedding podcast. The thing is that each planner is doing so many weddings that they don't really even start working on your wedding till, maybe 4 or 5 months out. And to a lot of people in the real world who are used to this idea of planning your wedding over the course of 2 years, that sounds unacceptable, but it's the way Disney rolls. So the closer you get to your day, the more attention you're going to get from your planner, because then you're becoming the priority over the people whose wedding is 12 months out or whatever. I've heard that it can help to have all of your emails in one thread and just keep replying to the same email. Bullet points help just to make everything as clear as you can. But like Natalie said, if you do need to talk to them over the phone, you can request to have a phone call or a Teams call. It is unfortunate that this is a lot of people's experience with Disney, especially because, like, I hear time and again, but I'm paying so much for this wedding. And it's true. So if you really want personalized hand-holding service, a Disney wedding might not be for you. This is another great reason to get an outside coordinator, because they can work with you the whole time leading up to your wedding, even when Disney's too busy to talk to you. So it will all work out. Almost everybody I interview on the podcast says, I was worried about it. Things weren't finalized till the last second, but then on the day of, everything was perfect.
Yeah, I think the more that you can go in with realistic expectations, the better, especially, people who come from big families who are used to big weddings, or from a big city or whatever. If you have siblings who had more traditional weddings, parents or family, or, even you or your partner might have an expectation about what a planning process might look like. And especially a planning process, if you're throwing a very large and expensive and premium event, what that level of service would look like. And Disney does have exceptional service and they will get things done, but the experience of planning a Disney fairy tale wedding can be really frustrating and feel kind of disjointed from the amount of money that you're about to hand over. But the experience in my case really delivered. And so it's just setting your expectations and setting expectations to and aligning on that with anyone who's going to be involved in the planning as well, of this is not a normal planning experience. This is a Disney planning experience, and that comes with some great perks and things you can only get through Disney, but also comes with some unique challenges of a venue that is putting on over 1,000 weddings a year or something like that. So it definitely comes with a unique experience in the planning process.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And so then the actual wedding day will be handled by your experience team. So this is a team of people who are there to coordinate each venue. And sometimes you have different people at the ceremony than you have at the reception. And sometimes you don't see your planner. Sometimes your planner is able to make it. But by all accounts, everybody I've interviewed, they are all great people. They know what they're doing. Enthusiastic people who are really excited to help you with your day. It can just be kind of unexpected for some people to get there and realize they're not going to see their actual planner. They're going to see this new team of people who will help out on the day of. How did that go for you guys, Natalie?
Our day of people were actually one of the most pleasant surprises of the day. Again, people that you have never met or never even really heard of until the day before in your rehearsal. The two ladies that helped us were so helpful. And, you are told and you hear from other brides that, like, right, they're primarily there for Disney, but those girls came prepared. They bustled my dress, which was a great perk of not having my bridesmaids on their hands and knees doing that bustle. Those girls were like professional bustlers. They bustled the dress. When I had a zipper malfunction, they whipped out some like tools from a fanny pack and helped with that too, in addition to my outside coordinator. And so our day of support was really, really great, which was kind of an unexpected perk because I wasn't expecting much from them other than kind of telling our guests where to go and making sure that we were staying on track. But they were super helpful and really engaging, and everyone actually really ended up loving our day of sport.
That's great to hear. So, if you want to see the full planning process end to end, it's all laid out in the newly revised Chapter 1 of the Fairytale Weddings Guide. I went back in and expanded it to make it a little bit clearer about how the minimums work, how the planning process works. And so that's a great way, especially if you're at a point where you either can't even start working with Disney or you're in limbo between signing your contract and working with your planner. You can check out Chapter 1 to see what you can expect and what you can start working on now. There's even a newly revised timeline that will show you, all the deadlines, what you can do every month on your own while you're waiting. So that can be a good place to occupy your time while you're waiting. So the reason I wrote the Fairytale Weddings Guide is because when I planned my Disney wedding, there was no transparency about how much anything would cost, what options were available. I didn't even know how much my wedding would cost until after I had signed the contract. So I put it all in this book. I put all the prices in there. I update it every time Disney changes things. In fact, I just updated it last week because they released a bunch of new pricing for 2026. So this is a 234-page guidebook, and it's going to have all the answers that you're not going to be getting from Disney until much closer to your date. So again, it's something that you can work with while you're waiting to start working with Disney or while you're waiting to hear back from Disney. It includes comprehensive current pricing, and if you get the ebook version, it comes with free updates. So Disney changes their prices all the time. I usually have to update the book 2 or 3 times per year. When they change their prices or their policies, things will change. I will put it in the book. All you have to do is log back into your account and you can download the latest version so you have all the prices, which is especially helpful if you are planning for down the road. Maybe you want to get married in 2 years, you can't start talking to Disney yet. You can get the book now, and then you'll know all the prices, and you'll see as they change and as the policies change. And that way, when you are ready, you will be very well versed in how Disney weddings work when you start working with Disney. There's also that budget calculator we've been talking about that shows you your personalized cost. So instead of having to fish around and see what other people who had 50-person weddings spent, you can see exactly how much you're going to spend, including how much extra you're going to spend on tax and service charges. There's a 56-page bridal organizer in the back. So if you're somebody who likes to write down all of the details, there are worksheets for your attendance names. There are little pocket schedules that you can fill in and cut out and hand to everybody in your wedding party. There is a checklist for talking to your DJ. Anything you can think of, there's a bridal organizer page in the back for that. And of course, the guide is filled with money-saving tips. I have an expanded 2-page section in Chapter 1 that is just money-saving tips. And then I put in all my best money-saving tips in each of the different sections. So when you get to the part about food and beverages, I have a ton of ways to save money on your bar. Those are all incorporated in there all throughout the book. And then there's a chapter on Disney alternatives. So if you realize, Disney's just out of our price range, but I still want to get married at Disney, there are places on property like the Swan and Dolphin, Paddlefish at Disney Springs, where you can have a wedding in the Disney bubble, but it's a little bit less expensive. And so I have all of that pricing in there too, if you want to investigate it. And then there's a whole chapter with information on private dining and group dining. Like if you're having a ceremony only event and you want to do a restaurant reservation, it talks about what's the method for making a large party reservation at Disney. I have charts that show different restaurants that are popular for this, how much they cost, what the capacities of the rooms are. And then last, there's a chapter on honeymoons and anniversaries. So if you decide you want to go back, it talks about ways to celebrate, how to order a custom cake, different fun things that you can do special that on your anniversary that you might not do on a regular trip. All of that is in the last chapter of the book.
I will say the Fairytale Weddings Guide was such a lifesaver, especially in the early planning process. Like I've said before, the period between signing your LOA, if you do that right at 12 months, and getting your planner can be kind of excruciating waiting for all of that. And the Fairytale Weddings Guide is so helpful to help you feel like you can still make progress and kind of understand things a little bit better. And we also use it as a reference as we were going through the planning process, because sometimes if you email your planner for like a simple question of like, how much would this cost? If it's something that you can find in the Fairytale Weddings Guide, you're going to get your answers so much more quickly than waiting, 5 to 7 business days to hear back from your planner for a simple question that you could kind of get at least a good sense of from the Fairytale Weddings Guide. And the fact that it updates with the new pricing and policies is super helpful as well. And so I can't recommend that enough. It is such a worthy investment. Like that was one of the first things that I did was buy that guide and listen to all of Carrie's podcasts. I got all of my kind of outside vendor ideas from the podcast. I picked my photographers, the roots, based on hearing about them on so many podcasts. And then from picking them, was able to assemble like this dream vendor team with hair and makeup and video and all of the partners that they recommended as well. So can't recommend enough, especially in that early phase where you can't really make progress with Disney. Spend time with the guide, spend time in the podcast because you'll get so many ideas and go into your first planning session a lot better equipped.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you found it helpful. The other thing I have introduced in the last couple of years is I offer consulting sessions over the phone. So you can book a 30 or 60-minute session with me. I find a lot of people like to do these at the beginning when they're first trying to figure out what venues they want, what will work for their group size or their vision. It's great to just sit and chat, and I can give you all my ideas, help you think of things you might not have considered when you're trying to find a venue. And then also people love to do BEO reviews. So they get their BEO back, and then we go through it line by line. We make sure there are no mistakes. We look for places that they can save money. And I've been told that that's also very helpful. So if you're interested in that, you can book that on the Fairytale Weddings Guide website on the consulting page. But Natalie, I really appreciate your taking the time to chat with me today and share all your great tips and advice from planning your own wedding. I think it's going to be super helpful for anyone who's getting started on this path to a Disney wedding or vow renewal. So I appreciate your taking the time.
Absolutely. It was so fun to chat about all of this.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Carrie Hayward. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join me again next week for another episode of the Disney Wedding Podcast. You can find past episodes and photo galleries for each show at DisneyWeddingPodcast.com or listen wherever you get your podcasts. For even more inspiration and planning tips, follow the Disney Wedding Podcast and Fairytale Weddings Guide on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube. And for instant answers to all your Walt Disney World wedding questions, download the ebook version of Carrie Hayward's Fairytale Weddings Guide at fairytaleweddingsguide.com.